Hi, everyone. This is Heather with Magnificent Mamas and Magnificent Authors podcast. We're joined here today with author Chris. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chris Curiata. I'm an author from the Niagara region of Canada. My novel is Sacrifice of the Sisters' Lot, a dark fantasy horror novel about four sisters and some creepy stuff in their house.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we talk about your book a little bit?
Sure. Like I said, I'm from the Niagara region of Canada. I grew up here, moved to Saskatchewan for about 13 years. Previously, I worked as a film editor on like a lot of true crime series and documentary about hockey. And then in about 2012, I started focusing on writing full-time, working on short stories, and I had stuff published in a lot of different magazines in Canada and the US, as well as
Awesome.
outside of North America, like in Ireland, Australia. Story of mine was translated in Japan. My first novel, Sacrifice the Sisters' Lot, was just published in October of last year, so it's still fresh, just about 6 months out now.
Hey, perfect time for some, boosting that promotion again. I mean, usually what they say 90 to 120 days is time to, get it out there again a little more. So hopefully this helps you get your book out there to more readers. And do you want to go ahead and tell me a little bit about your book?
Sacrifice the Sisters' Lot takes place during the summer of 1988. It's about four sisters growing up in a house where they discover that there's some kind of an entity within the walls of the house, and that the girls are able to communicate it, and this thing will essentially grant them wishes, not physical things, but can sort of make things happen, helps them find boyfriends or perhaps feel more confident about themselves. Of course, as these stories often go, that there's also a dark side, something bad that happens each time. They use this power from the wall, and the girls have an uncle who is sort of a low-rent faith healer on TV, and he conspires to get the girls' parents sent out of the house so then he can move in, because he figures like, well, hey, if I can get them to use the wall, then I can now create miracles for real.
Oh boy, does the parents move out?
No, I don't want to give too much away.
Okay, yes, we don't want any spoilers. I didn't know if that would give a spoiler away or not. That's okay, no worries. So when you think of the entity, is it more like a ghost spirit type of thing, or more like a genie, djinn type of thing?
It doesn't have a personification of being, like a human figure. I see it. It's more like a force of nature.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I'm just curious to get a little picture visualization of it. What got you into writing?
I've been writing ever since I was a child, and because it was just another form of play. So the same as when you had your little army men or your Star Wars action figures, you were making up little stories with them. You're on the schoolyard with your friends, and it was a group of you. You were generally kind of like making up a story, like, all right, we're the Ghostbusters, and now we're hunting these guys, or we're going after these. I was fortunate to grow up in a house that was filled with books. My parents were big readers, so because of that, once I learned to make my writing in kindergarten, then I would start writing stories. And the first thing I would have done would have essentially been fan fiction. First thing I wrote was Story of Frankenstein. I had seen the Boris Karloff movie on the 8 o'clock movie and was fascinated by it. And at school, they had one of the old typewriters. And I remember one day sitting down, spending like almost the whole class time, just very slowly, hunt and peck, typing out the Story of Frankenstein. I thought it was going to be a whole book. I was surprised when it was only just one page.
Oh, no.
But as time has gone on, I've learned to make the stories a little bit longer.
But you focus on short stories mainly?
No. For the longest time, I was focusing on novels. I did about 3 novels before the one that was published. I don't know, they just didn't really like come together. It was still like the learning process. And then after that, I switched off and I was focused on short stories and did them for quite a few years. And interestingly enough, then the novel that has just been published, Sisters' Lot, did initially start. I thought it was just going to be a short story, the first chapter. But then about a month after I wrote it, I was working on another short story, and I thought, this is probably going to be the same characters. And then from there, it just developed into the full-length book.
What age range would you say it's geared towards, or can anyone that can read, would teenagers read it, or is it too graphic? Or
yes, teenagers would read it. It's not graphic. It's not explicit, although it does deal with a lot of traumatic subjects. There's a lot of things there, the mental health and sexual abuse and alcoholism.
Do you have to provide trigger warnings on stuff like that, or no? Like at the beginning of the book?
There's no, I didn't put trigger warnings in the book because I didn't feel like, well, I don't think there's anything in there that strong.
Yeah. I read a horror book recently and there was trigger warnings in there. And after finishing the book, I see why the trigger warnings were in there. The book was amazing. It was phenomenal. But yeah, I get why the author put them in there. And
the weird thing about trigger warnings is that, I mean, because they tend to be very, very, very personal per person. And that it's like for example, I have a friend who had, a child who, died to suicide. And I remember going to see the movie Poor Things, and like the first scene, there's like, the suicide thing. I was like, oh, she would want to know about that because, she obviously would not
want to see
that unprepared. But like, most other people would go to see that movie and like, wouldn't even think of it. Like on the one hand, you can't have trigger warnings for everything. So I think I felt like, because like, well, I mean, there's nothing in the book that's like really, really explicit that's going to take people by surprise.
Yeah. You're kind of right though. Like really when it comes to the trigger warnings, anything could be a trigger for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like driving down the road could be a trigger. So I get
I'm certainly not against them. It's just hard to know when to apply them because they, like I said, they generally just tend to be very, very personal it depends on who the person is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have family obviously your family that was interested in reading, were they interested in writing as well?
Someone once told me that when my father was younger, he tried his hand at like writing for a little while, but then I think he just sort of got because he got saddled with kids to raise and had to work.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to think he's very excited that he can vicariously live through me, like, oh, at least my son's getting some of the family stories out there.
That's awesome. Is that what some of them are, is family stories, or just?
Well, yeah, I mean, like in a lot of ways, writing is reporting. I think that pretty much most authors that, their life experiences get filtered into their work, even though it's not all about autobiographical. You just can't help because these are your experiences. This is the way you've seen the world, so it's going to wind up being in your work.
Just like you put a little bit of yourself as into a character, so to speak. They say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I get that.
Like the house in the book is the family house that I grew up in, for the simple fact, because then it's like easy. I'm not going to mess up with the book by having the geography wrong. I'm going to know exactly where the bathroom is and where the hallway is, so I don't have to think about planning it out because, well, I know that's the house I grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, geography and mapping, if you're going into detail, you definitely don't want to mess that up. That's awesome to use a house that you've actually been in and experienced. Where if there's a squeaky floorboard or squeaky door, you can describe where it's at. Would you say you modeled any characters after anyone you know?
I'm never going to admit to that if I ever do it.
Okay.
No, everybody in the book is just purely invented fiction. There's no...
I know I was writing a character and I didn't really think about it at the time, but I made him out to be like my uncle in real life, like similar characteristics about him. And when I went back and I was reading it, I was like, wow, that sounds just like my Uncle Jim. And I was like, wow, that's funny. I never intentionally started it like that, but it just kind of came about.
That's why I would never admit it, because, of course, there are characters that are based off people that I know. Well, you also want the freedom. It's like, well, yeah, but this character is also going to be doing things that, this person did not. You tell them, yes, that's that child rapist I based off you. They're like, what? No, just not that part. Just,
no.
That was your name.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. So like,
an most extreme example I could think of.
That's a totally extreme example. I would never have thought of that either. Oh, wow. That's funny. So, if you could bring a character to life from any of your books and do something for a day, who would it be and what would you do?
I really like the lead character in Sister's Lot, the young girl Emery, just because we share a lot of the same interests. She loves the monster movies. She's very, very optimistic, and I think she would be a fun person to just go to Niagara Falls and go down Clifton Hill, because she would love checking out all the attractions there, the House of Frankenstein and the Fun House.
That sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any character that you wrote that was just so incredibly hard to write about, if that makes sense?
In some ways, a lot of them are always hard, because what makes a character really, really exciting is when you feel like you're not really writing them, because they just have the right words and they just have this personality that you're going along with. But then a lot of times it's like you need the character to do a certain thing, and then you feel like, it doesn't quite feel natural, but now the story depends upon it. So now it's not so much the character that's hard, it's trying to figure out, okay, well, what else has to happen to guide the character to where I need them to be. Because as much as we say, it's like, the character, should be writing itself, and the character should be its own person. there is also the reality of like, well, I'm telling a story and there are things that need to happen. So they,
Yeah. Have you ever had a character go from you plan it out, say it's a good guy, whatever, and then totally take on a different form throughout the writing, like ends up becoming not the way you planned, by the way, like becomes a villain just through the character development, just not planned?
I think so. Like, for example, in The Sisters Lot, there's a very bratty boy that's very cruel to Emery. And seems like, when he gets older, like, he might be a very, very problematic person. But as the book went on, I had like more and more scenes with him and more information about him. It wasn't so much that I decided he was like a good kid, but I definitely felt more empathy towards him. It probably at the start, I was probably like, this is just like a rotten kid. And like, yeah, he's a rotten kid, but I'm like, yeah, but I can clearly see he's also like a sad kid, and he's probably also had a lot of disadvantages in his life. So yeah, I'd much more empathy towards him, and I think that's sort of reflected in the writing, that it's not. It's like because the book is written in Emery's voice, and sort of like the last time she sees him, it's almost like a nice little moment.
Do you have anyone that inspired you to write?
Yeah, I've been really lucky that I've known a lot of creative people. In high school, I had a group of friends who were very much into cartooning. This would have been in the late 90s when there was that big boom of, I think it was called the alternative comic books that weren't the superhero things done by, if like, Peter Bagg or Chester Brown, Joe Matt, R. Crumb, those type of comics. And they were very into that. So we spent like a lot of our times drawing, comics, and we would trade them back and forth, or we would do like these exercises where we would do the strip together. Like, one person would draw one panel and then would get passed on to the next person. They would draw the next panel, and then it would go on to like a third person. Between like 3 or 4 of you, you would sort of alternate and try to create this story.
That sounds fun.
And so, even years later, when I was doing short stories, I'd still had like contact with these people, and they were still very interested in reading what I was writing. And it was, because that is really, I think, the greatest encouragement you can have as you're working as an author, is that there's someone who is interested in reading this work. I have a great friend in Winnipeg who read these early novels that I worked on, and I think that was a huge motivator that like kept me going, was the fact that I'm like, well, there is an audience. When I finish this book a year from now, I know at least one person is going to read it.
Would you say just having one person read the novel is a win compared to becoming famous like Stephen King or somebody like that?
I think so. It's main thing you want to do, yes, is connect to readers, have people reading the story. Because
so who is your favorite authors to read?
Oh my gosh, there's so many fantastic authors I really enjoy. Like, even starting back, like some of the first writers that I read, like Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. I still go back. Just recently I was at the used bookstore and I found some of Judy Blume's old books and some of the Beverly Cleary, Ramona and Beeze's.
Yep.
I think that in Sacrifice of the Sisters Lot, the relationship between the older sister and the young sister was probably unconsciously very influenced by Ramona and Beeze's. I loved those books growing up. And then like in high school, I would have started reading Stephen King, who's a fantastic storyteller. There's such a huge output of book, as well as other authors like Neil Gaiman. I remember finding Roddy Doyle, the Irish writer, wrote The Snapper and Commitments, The Band, Nick Hornby's stuff. I always liked writing that had like a lot of humor in it. I find the humor is very important in the books that I read.
Yeah.
As much as I admire like someone like Cormac McCarthy, like reading Blood Meridian was a wonderful experience. It still to me doesn't. I don't treasure it as much as say like Moby Dick, which has so much humor in it. I remember being surprised because I'd been afraid of that book. Like I said, like all this whale historical stuff and really and like just on the first page alone, I think I laughed out loud twice. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really fantastic.
What would you say your favorite genres to read are?
I don't really have a favorite genre other than the genre of a good story. Or the genre that's good. I love to read horror. I also love reading, like I said, authors like Roddy Doyle or Nick Hornby, where it's just stuff about daily life. I enjoy historical books. Like I mentioned, Moby Dick is another.
Yeah.
Book I enjoyed quite a bit. So yeah, I wouldn't say like, yes, I like horror better than anything else, or that I love.
Well, I just know some authors, they actually they write one genre, but then they enjoy reading like a totally different genre.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm curious sometimes. Like I have a horror author and she loves like reading romance. It's just kind of funny to, I don't know, put it together, I guess. I mean, everyone has their interests, of course, but it's always surprising.
Yeah, I always thought that's the funny thing. Those two two genres, romance and horror, seem to be defined by, the romance books, they're about the things you would love to have happen to you, whereas horror books are about the things that you do not want to have happen to you.
Yeah, and you can't help but love it. I mean, if you had to co-author a book with somebody, who would it be?
Well, obviously, even King, because that would give me a big readership.
Yeah, that would be for sure. Do you worry that, like, if you were to co-author with somebody like that, what their opinions of your writing, or are you confident that they would love your writing as much as everyone else does?
Well, when you're collaborating with someone, you would want to pick someone that you have sort of like that mutual respect for each other's work. I did a couple of years ago. I collaborated with a writer on a film script for a horror film, and it was a good it was a good exercise to do. And I think we both had that mindset of like it was just about coming up with the best. Neither one of us were that upset when someone was like, I don't think this section is working, and I think it did. The collaboration did go well because like by the end of it, it was so, I think, finally done together. I couldn't really point out exactly what was Colin's stuff and what was mine.
Yeah, that's awesome though. That is very cool. So the stuff on that side of things that you've made, the videos that you've done what screenplays for?
No, I was a film editor.
Film editor. Would it be anything we would have heard of?
It was a lot of, this would have been in like for most of the, the 2000s, a lot of stuff for, History Television or the A&E Identity, I think it's called, Crime Channel. It was like a lot of the different crime series would have been called Crime Stories. I'm not sure, what it would have been called in other countries.
Yeah.
A series called Trading Places. Yeah, Trading Places, where like families would swap each other's homes. There's a lot of documentary series or reality programs, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And in some ways, I think it did kind of influence like my writing style, because a lot of times when I'm writing something, I'm not doing it in a linear fashion. Like I sort of have like strong ideas about scenes. And so I would write those and then write other stuff around it and then sort of piece it together afterwards, sort of the same workflow you would do as a documentary where you shoot a bunch of footage and then at the end now piece together the best parts and figure out a structure for them.
Would you say when you're writing, like everyone's style is different? So there's the people that outline and do that, and then there's somebody like me who just, starts writing and goes from there, like answer type of thing. What would you say your writing would be like? Do you outline?
I've not had much success with the outline. But what usually happens is I'll do a first draft and then I might do like the outline thing just to figure out like, okay, is this maybe where you can construct your stuff better? But just the initial draft, I find that I get better work done because it's sort of like about the discovery. And when you're making that discovery while you're actually writing something, I think you have like a better chance for catching those moments of inspiration.
Oh yeah.
For me, if I try doing just like the outline, it's like, well, that's where all the discovery is happening. And then when I'm actually now trying to do it more creatively, it almost feels like, I've kind of already figured this out. I don't have that creative spark anymore. It's like, I know that works well for some people. It's not about one process being better than the other. It's just
no. I'm not saying one is better than the other by any means. I'm just curious as to what style, like if you follow an outline or not. I could never follow an outline myself for writing. That's for sure.
And also when you're working in genre, a lot of times it feels like you kind of have an outline because you sort of know like, okay, well, I've got this initial idea. I know things are going to progressively get worse. And then at the end, either they defeat it or they're defeated by it. It's almost like you have a rough outline in your mind.
When I'm writing, I picture it ahead of time in my head, and then I go back and I write it all down. If you could give any advice to an aspiring author, what would it be?
I know a lot of people give this advice, and it's probably because it is the best advice. It is to finish things. Finish that story. I finished stories it was a terrible finish. It was being finished just to be finished. But with that thing done, I was able to go back to it and improve it. And a lot of them became publishable stories. To me, I think that is the best advice that I hear from a lot of authors is that, you have to have something finished, because when it's finished, you can work on it.
Is there anything else you want to share about your books today before we get ready to end any upcoming project?
I'll just take the opportunity to show off this nice cover again.
It's awesome. It really is. It looks good.
By Palimpsest Press, which is a small press in Canada in Windsor, Ontario. They've done a good job getting the book out there. You can get it from either the Palimpsest Press website, palimpsestpress.ca. It's available on Amazon, of course. It's available as an ebook on all the various platforms. They got it into quite a few of the Indigo stores, which I wasn't expecting. It's kind of
That's
awesome.
awesome.
A nice moment of being being in Toronto or being in Niagara Falls and popping into a bookstore and seeing copies of it on the shelf.
That's awesome. What about audiobook form?
No, they haven't done that.
Maybe one day.
A little book tour coming up in May. Right now, I know that I'll be at the Ravens End bookstore in Winnipeg, Manitoba on May 11th, and I'll be at the Tuppenny Copy and Books in Regina, Saskatchewan on May 18th.
And it's just been really fun today. So,
all right, have a great day.
You too. Bye.